Good morning. I am Christina, and today we will gonna discover what happened in Cavite Mutiny. Cavite Mutiny, January 20, 1872. Brief uprising of 200 Filipino troops and workers at the Cavite Arsenal, which became the excuse for Spanish repression of the embryonic Philippine nationalist movement. Ironically, the harsh reaction of the Spanish authorities served ultimately to promote the nationalist cause. Unity was quickly crushed, but the Spanish regained under the reactionary governor Rafael D. Izquierdo, magnified the incidents and used it as an excuse to clamp down on those Filipinos who had been calling for governmental reform. A number of Philippine intellectuals were cited and accused the complicity with the mutineers. After a brief trial, three priests, Jose Burgos, Jacinto Zamora, and Mariano Gomez, were publicly executed. The three subsequently became martyrs to the cause of Philippine independence. 1872, a historic year of two events. Number 1. Cavite Mutiny. A major factors in the awakening of Islam among the Filipinos. Mutiny. A rebellion against authority comes from the old word mutin, which means revolt. The martyrdom of the three priests. Gomborza, collective name of the three martyred priests, tagged as a mastermind of the Cavite Mutiny. Gomborza. They were prominent Filipino priests charged with treason and sedition. The Spanish clergy connected the priests with the community as a part of conspiracy to stifle the movement of secular priests who desired to help their own parishes instead of being assistant for the king of Columbus. Father Jose Burgos, Spanish descent, born in the Philippines. He was a parish priest of the Manila Cathedral and had been known to be close to the liberal governor General de la Torre. He was 35 years old at that time and was active and outspoken in advocating Philippinization of the clergy. Father Mariano Gomez, an old man in his mid-70s, Chinese Filipino, born in Cavite. He held the most senior position of the three as Archbishop Vicar in Cavite. He was truly nationalistic and accepted the death penalty calmly as though it were his penance for being pro-Filipinos. Father Jacinto Zamora, 37 years old, was also Spanish, born in the Philippines. He was the parish priest of Marikina and was known to be unfriendly to and would not countenance any arrogance of authority behavior from Spaniards coming from the Spain. Spanish accounts of the Cavite Mutiny. Number 1. Montero's account of the Cavite Mutiny. Number 2. Official report of the Governor Izquierdo on the Cavite Mutiny of 1872. Jose Montero y Vidal, Spanish historian. His account centered on how the event was an attempt at overthrowing the Spanish government in the Philippines. His account on mutiny was criticized and woefully biased. Montero's account of the Cavite Mutiny. The idea of attaining their independence, it was towards his goal that they started to work with the powerful assistance of a certain section of a native clergy. Governor Rafael Izquierdo implicated the native clergy who were active in the movement toward secularization of parishes. In a biased report, he highlighted the attempt to overthrow the Spanish government the Philippines to install a new hari, in the persons of Padre Burgos and Zamora. According to Escardo, native clergy attract supporters by giving them charismatic assurance that their fight would not fail because they had God's supports. Aside from the promises of lofty reward, such as employment, wealth, and rank in the army. Spanish accounts underscore the reason for the revolution: abolition of privileges enjoyed by the workers of Cavite Arsenal, such as exemption from the payment of tribute and being employed in polos y servicios, forced labor. Presence of the native clergy against the Spanish friars conspired and supported the rebels. In the Spaniards' account, 1872 was promulgated as a part of a big conspiracy among educated leaders, mestizos, lawyers, and residents of Manila and Cavite. Widely planned to liquidate high-ranking Spanish officers and killed friars. January 20, 1872, the district of Sampaloc celebrated the Fiesta of Virgin Loreto. Came with it were some fireworks displayed. The Caviteños mistook this as a signal of commence with the attack. In result, leaders of the plot were killed. Father Gomez, Burgos, and Zamora were tried by a court-martial and sentenced to be executed. Others who were implicated, such as Joaquin Pardo de Tavera, Antonio Maria Regidor, Jose Baza, and Payo Baza, and other Filipino lawyers were suspended from the practice of law, arrested and sentenced to life imprisonment at the Marianas Island. On February 17, 1872, the Gomborza were executed by garrote in public to serve as a threat to Filipinos never to attempt to fight the Spaniards again. This is a scene purportedly witnessed by a young Jose Rizal. Dr. Trinidad Hermigildo Pardo de Tavera, a Filipino scholar and researcher, wrote a Filipino version of the bloody incident in Cavite. Differing accounts of the events of 1872. Number 1. Pardo de Tavera's account of the Cavite Mutiny. Number 2. Plowshot's account of the Cavite Mutiny. Pardo de Tavera's account of the Cavite Mutiny. Filipinos had great hopes of an improvement in the affairs of their country. The priors feared that their power in the colony would soon be complete, a thing of the past. Edmond Plowshot, a French writer, complemented the verse account and analyzed the motivation of the 1872 Cavite Mutiny. According to Pardo de Tavera, the incident was merely a mutiny by Filipino soldiers and laborers of the Cavite Arsenal to the satisfaction arising from the draconian policies of Escardo, abolition of privileges and prohibition of the founding of the School of Arts and Trades. Plowshot's account of the Cavite Mutiny. The arrival in Manila of General Escardo put a sudden end to all dreams of reforms. Such a policy must really end in a strong desire on the part of the other to repress cruently. Differing accounts. Priors used Cavite Mutiny as a part of leaders' conspiracy to cement their dominance. They showcased the mutiny as a part of a great conspiracy in the Philippines by Filipinos to overthrow the Spanish government. Unintentionally, it resulted in the martyrdom of Gomborza and paved way to the revolution culminating in 1898. Rizal dedicated his second novel, El Filibusterismo, to their memory. I dedicate my work to you as a victims of a evil which I undertake to combat. And that is the end of our story about Cavite Mutiny. And I hope you learned something from that. And once again, I am Christina, and thank you.
Hi, so today I'm going to react about the Cavite Mutiny. Cavite Mutiny, January 20, 1872, brief uprising of Filipino troops and workers at Cavite Arsenal, which became the excuse for Spanish oppression of the embryonic Philippine nationalist movement. Ironically, the harsh reaction of the Spanish authorities served ultimately to promote the nationalist cause. The mutiny was quickly crushed, but the Spanish regime under the reactionary governor Rafael de Izquierdo magnified the incident and used it as an excuse to clamp down on those Filipinos who had been calling for government reform. A number of Filipino intellectuals were seized and accused of complicity with the mutineers. After a brief trial, three prized Jose Burgos, Cinto Zamora, and Mariano Gomez were publicly executed. The three subsequently became martyrs to the cause of the Philippine independence. The martyrdom of the three prized which is collective name of the three martyred prize tag as the masterminds of the Cavite meeting, which is the Comborza, were prominent Filipino prize charged with treason and sedition. The Spanish clergy connected the prize to the mutiny as part of the conspiracy to stifle the movement of secular priests who desired to have their own parishes instead of being assistant to the regular friars. First, there was dissatisfaction among the workers of the arsenal as well as the member of the native army after their privileges were drawn back by General Izquierdo. Second, General Izquierdo introduced rigid and strict policies that made the Filipinos turn away from Spanish government out of disgust. Third, the central government failed to conduct an investigation on what truly transpired, but relied on reports of Izquierdo and the friars and the opinion of the public. Fourth, the happy days of the friars were already numbered in 1872, when the central government in Spain decided to deprive them of the power to intervene in government affairs. Fifth, Filipinos during that time were active participants and responded to what they deemed as injustices. And lastly, the execution of Comborza was blunder on the part of the Spanish government, for the action severed the ill feelings of the Filipinos, and the event inspired Filipinos patriots to call for reforms and eventually independence. The road to independence was rough and tough. Many patriots, named and unnamed, shed their bloods to attain independence. Our forefathers suffered enough. We should not forget that before we came across to victory, as we enjoy our freedom, maybe more historically aware of our past to have a better future ahead of us.
Hey everyone, it's Mera, and today we will talk about Cavite Mutiny. What comes to your mind when you hear the word mutiny? Well, mutiny is the uprising, revolt, or riot, or in Tagalog word it called pag-aalsa. And many of you are wondering, where did this mutiny happen on Cavite? Well, particularly on the Arsenal. Take note that the word arsenal is the place where the firearms, the sharp objects like knife and other weapons are made on the arsenal. Cavite Mutiny started because of Governor General Rafael de Izquierdo because of his abolition of privileges to the workers of the arsenal and the tribute for the forced labor. And the Spaniards used the Cavite Mutiny to hook the three priests, Mariano Gomez, Jose Burgos, and Jacinto Zamora, the Gomborza. These executions, particularly those of the Gomborza, were to have a significant effect on the people because of the shadowy nature of the trials. Dr. Jose Rizal dedicated his work El Filibusterismo to the executed priest. Many scholars believe that the Cavite Mutiny of 1872 was the beginning of the Filipino nationalism, which eventually led to the 1896 Philippine Revolution.
The Cavite Mutiny is interesting because there are the number of different contemporary accounts of it, and there are a number of different views as to its importance in the subsequent history in the Philippines. The Cavite Mutiny is an aim of natives to get rid of the Spaniard government in the Philippines due to the removal of the privilege enjoyed by the laborers of the Cavite arsenal, such as exemption from the tribute in forced labor. The Democratic and Republican books and pamphlets, the speeches and preaching of apostles of these new ideas in Spain, and the outburst of the American publicists and the cruel policies of the insensitive governor whom the reigning government sent to govern the country. Filipinos put into action these ideas were the occurring conditions which gave rise to the idea of achieving their independence. Jose Montero y Vidal is a Spanish historian who interpreted that the mutiny was an attempt to remove and overthrow the Spanish colonizers in the Philippines. His account corroborated with the account of Governor General Rafael Escudero y Gutierrez, the Governor General of the Philippine Islands during the mutiny. They mentioned that the mutiny was powered by a group of native clergy. After reading this article about Cavite Mutiny in 1872, this gives a very readable historian assessment of the reliability of various accounts of the mutiny itself. However, what might be even more important in reflecting on it would be its impact as part of the Philippines nationalist or independence narrative. A Google search of Cavite Mutiny Philippine nationalism yields a lot of good starting points for this. By voting to the Philippine Revolution against Spain, which broke out in 1896. At the time, Spain was embroiled in numerous revolutions and civil wars, with a tug-of-war between liberals and absolutists or monarchists, hence the ideas that rocked Spanish politics and the royal court were understandably transmitted to its colonies, shaping the political terrain and laying down the foundation for the aspiration of equality and modernity. In 1872, with Izquierdo abrogating the exemption of tribute and forced labor long enjoyed by the workers of the Cavite Navy Yard, among whom were artillery support and corps of engineer. All of them entitled of the benefits rose up in arms and mutinied against the colonial government. On January 20, 1872, approximately 200 workers from the Marine Battalion of the Arsenal, which included sailors and artillerymen, led by Fernando La Madrid, seized Fort San Felipe.
and subdued 7 Spanish officers. While the mutiny lasted only 2 days due to the swift reaction of the colonial administration, massive arrests soon followed, including those who had no connections to the mutiny, half Spaniards, Creoles, secular priests, lawyers, merchants, or businessmen. Local officials. All they had in common was that they openly campaigned and supported liberal ideas. Among those arrested were the 3 secular priests who have long voiced out the unequal treatment towards secular Filipino clergy in favor of the Spanish friars. They were Mariano Gomez de Los Angeles, priest of Bacoor, Cavite, Jose Burgos, an Ilocano priest assigned at the Manila Cathedral, and Jacinto Zamora, a parish priest of Marikina. Stripped of their robes and chained, the first of the comparsa to be executed was Combs, who told his confessor, "Father, I know that not a leaf falls to the ground but by the will of God, since He wills that I should die here, His holy will be done." At the moment of their execution, he ordered every church to toll their bells to make known his acknowledgement of the martyrs' innocence, and he believed them to be. A prospect of independence was waiting in the wings.
Of every year since 1898 is a very important event for all the Filipinos. In this particular day, the entire Filipino nation as well as Filipino communities all over the world gathers to celebrate the Philippines Independence Day. 1898 came out to be a very significant year for all of us. It is equally important as 1896, the year when the Philippine Revolution broke out, owing to the Filipinos' desire to be free from the abuses of the Spanish colonial regime. But we should be reminded that another year is as historic as these two, the year 1872. Two major events happened in 1872. First was the 1872 Cavite Mutiny, and the other was the martyrdom of the 3 martyr priests in the persons of Father Mariano Gomez, Jose Burgos, and Jacinto Zamora are commonly known as the Gomburza. However, not all of us knew that there were different accounts in reference to said event. All Filipinos must know the different sides of the story, since this event led to another tragic yet meaningful part of our history, the execution of Gomburza, which in fact a major factor in the awakening of nationalism among the Filipinos. The event and made use of it to implicate the native clergy, which was then active in the call for secularization. The two accounts complemented and corroborated with one another, only that the general support was more spiteful. Initially, both Montero and Izquierdo scored out that the abolition of privileges enjoyed by the workers of Cavite Arsenal, such as non-payment of tributes and exemptions from forced labor, were the main reasons of the revolution, as how they called it. However, other causes were enumerated by them, including the Spanish Revolution, which overthrew the secular throne, dirty propagandas, proliferated by unrestrained press, democratic, liberal, and republican books and pamphlets reaching the Philippines, and most importantly, the presence of the native clergy who, out of animosity against the Spanish friars, or conspired and supported the rebels and enemies of Spain. In particular, Izquierdo blamed the unruly Spanish press for stockpiling malicious propagandas grasped by the Filipinos. He reported to the King of Spain that the rebels wanted to overthrow the Spanish government to install a new hari in the likes of Fathers Burgos and Zamora. The general added that the native clergy enticed other participants by giving them charismatic assurance that their fight will not fail because God is with them, coupled with handsome promises of rewards such as employment,
wealth, and ranks in the army. So Izquierdo in his report lambasted the Injus as gullible and possessed an innate propensity for stealing. So the two Spaniards deemed that the event of 1872 was planned earlier and was thought of it as a big conspiracy among leaders, mestizos, abogadillos, or native leaders, residents of Manila and Cavite, and the native clergy. They insinuated that the conspirators of Manila and Cavite planned to liquidate high-ranking Spanish officers to be followed by the massacre of the friars. The alleged pre-concerted signal among the conspirators of Manila and Cavite was the firing of rockets from the walls of Intramuros. According to the accounts of the two, on January 20, 1872, the district of Sampaio celebrated the feast of the Virgin of Loreto. Unfortunately, participants to the feast celebrated the occasion with the usual fireworks displays. Allegedly, those in Cavite mistook the fireworks as the sign for the attack, and just like what was agreed upon, the 200-man contingent headed by Sergeant Lamadrid launched an attack, targeting Spanish officers at Sight and Cias de Arsenal. When the news reached the iron-fisted Governor Izquierdo, he readily ordered the reinforcement of the Spanish forces in Cavite to quell the revolt. The revolution was easily crushed when the expected reinforcement from Manila did not come ashore. Major instigator, including Sergeant Lamadrid, were killed in the skirmish, while the Gomborza were tried by a court-martial and were sentenced to die by strangulation. Patriots like Joaquin Pardo de Tavera, Antonio Maria Regidor, Jose and Pio Basa, and the other abogadillos were suspended by the Audiencia or the High Court from the practice of law, arrested, and were sentenced with life imprisonment at the Marianas Island. Furthermore, Governor Izquierdo dissolved the native regiments of artillery and ordered the creation of artillery force to be composed exclusively of the Peninsulares. On February 17, 1872, in an attempt of the Spanish government and the Friarocracia to instill fear among the Filipinos so that they may never commit such daring act again, the Gombors were executed. This event was tragic but served as one of the moving forces that shaped Filipino nationalism. So, for the suspended by the Audiencia or the High Court from the practice of law, arrested, and were sentenced with life imprisonment at the Marianas Island. Furthermore, Governor Izquierdo dissolved the native regiments of artillery and ordered the creation of artillery force to be composed exclusively of the Peninsulares. On February 17, 1872, in an attempt of the Spanish government and the Friarocracia to instill fear among the Filipinos so that they may never commit such daring act again, the Gombors were executed. This event was tragic but served as one of the moving forces that shaped Filipino nationalism. So, for the Filipinos' perspective, according to Dr. Trinidad Hermenegildo Pardo de Tavera, a Filipino scholar and researcher, wrote the Filipino version of the bloody incident in Cavite. In his point of view, the incident was a mere mutiny by the native Filipino soldiers and laborers of the Cavite arsenal who turned out to be dissatisfied with the abolition of their privileges. Indirectly, Tavera blamed Governor Izquierdo's cold-blooded policies such as the abolition of privileges of the workers and native army members of the arsenal and the prohibition of the founding of School of Arts and Trades for the Filipinos, which the general believed as a cover-up for the organization of a political club. On January 20, 1872, about 200 men comprised of soldiers, laborers of the arsenals, and residents of Cavite, headed by Sergeant Lamadrid, rose in arms and assassinated the commanding officers and Spanish officers inside. The insurgents were expecting support from the bulk of the army. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. So the news about the mutiny reached the authorities in Manila, and General Izquierdo immediately ordered the reinforcement of Spanish troops in Cavite. After 2 days, the mutiny was officially declared subdued. So Tavera believed that the Spanish friars and Izquierdo used the Cavite mutiny as a powerful lever by magnifying it as a full-blown conspiracy involving not only the native army but also included residents of Cavite and Manila, and more importantly, the native clergy, to overthrow the Spanish government in the Philippines. It is noteworthy that during the time the central government in Madrid announced its intention to deprive the friars of all the powers of intervention in matters of civil government and the direction and management of educational institutions. This turnout of event was believed by Tavera prompted the friars to do something drastic in their dire desire to maintain power in the Philippines. Meanwhile, in the intention of installing reforms, the central government of Spain welcomed an educational decree authored by Sigismundo Moret, promoted the fusion of sectarian schools run by the friars into a school called Philippine Institute. The decree proposed to improve the standards of education in the Philippines by requiring teaching positions in such schools to be filled by competitive examinations. This improvement was warmly received by most Filipinos in spite of the native clergy's zest for secularization. So the friars, fearing that their influence in the Philippines would be a thing of the past, took advantage of the incident and presented it to the Spanish government as a vast conspiracy organized throughout the archipelago with the object of destroying Spanish sovereignty. So Tavera said he confirmed that the Madrid government came to believe that this scheme was true without any attempt to investigate the real facts or extent of the alleged revolution reported by Izquierdo and the friars. Convicted educated men who participated in the mutiny were sentenced life imprisonment, while members of the native clergy headed by the Gumburza were tried and executed by garrote. Convicted educated men who participated in the mutiny were sentenced life imprisonment, while members of the native clergy headed by the Gumburza were tried and executed by garrote. So this episode leads to the awakening of nationalism and eventually to the outbreak of Philippine Revolution in 1896.
A pleasant day, everyone. I'm here today to react about the 1872 Cavite Mutiny. The year 1872 is a historic year of the two events, the Cavite Mutiny and the martyrdom of the three priests. We have Father Mariano Gomez, Jose Burgos, and Jacinto Zamora, later immortalized as Gumburza. There are two versions of first-hand accounts about the 1872 Cavite Mutiny, the accounts from the Spaniards and the accounts coming from the Filipinos. And now, we are going to examine of which accounts tells the truth. These events are important milestones in Philippine history and have caused ripples throughout time, directly influencing the decisive events of the Philippine Revolution toward the end of the century. In this case study, we zoom into the events of the Cavite Mutiny, a major factor in awakening the nationalism among the Filipinos. For the Spanish version of the 1872 Cavite Mutiny, the documentation of Spanish historian Jose Montero y Vidal centered on how the event was an attempt in overthrowing the Spanish government in the Philippines. So for him, ang pangyayari noong Cavite Mutiny ay nakasentro at umikot lamang sa pagpapabagsak ng Spanish government dito sa ating bansa. Although regarded as a historian, his account of the mutiny was criticized as woefully biased and rabid for a scholar. So kahit magaling at mahusay itong mananalaysay si Vidal, ay marami rin ang bumabatiko sa kanya dahil hindi siya patas. Parang may kinikilingan siya sa kanyang salaysay at yun ay ang panig ng mga Espanyol dahil siya isang Espanyol at marami nang kumekestyon sa kanya bilang isang mag-aaral ng kasaysayan. Isa pang salaysay ang maiugnay natin dito sa Cavite Mutiny ay ang official report ni Gobernador General Rafael Izquierdo. Kasi noong mga panahon na iyon, dahil wala pa naman tayong presidente, nagpapadala ang Espanya ng representative dito sa Pilipinas na magsisilbing mamumuno sa ating bansa. At yun ay sa kaatauhan ni Gobernador General Rafael Izquierdo. Sa kwento ni Rafael Izquierdo, hindi lang niya sinasabi na nangyari yung mutiny dahil gusto nilang pabagsakin ang gobyerno ng Espanya dito sa Pilipinas. Kung hindi, pinalala pa niya yung sitwasyon. Pinalaki niya ang mga isyu na sinasabi niya na ang nagplano daw sa pag-aklas na ito ay mga kaparian o yung mga native clergy. Noong panahon na yon ay pinupush nila ang secularization of parishes o gustong magkaroon ng sariling mga simbahan o parish itong mga paring Pilipino kesa sila ay pamumunuan ng mga Spanish friars. Gusto nilang they could have their own congregation. Which means, ayaw na mga paring Pilipino na inuutos-utusan lang sila ng mga Spanish friars. Spanish accounts of the Cavite Mutiny. It is apparent that the accounts underscore the reason for the revolution, the abolition of the privileges enjoyed by the workers of the Cavite arsenal, such as exemption from payment of tribute and being employed in polo y servicios or forced labor. Nangingibabaw daw doon sa mga salita sa salaysay na ito ang dahilan ng himagsikan o pag-aaklas. At yun ang pag-alis ng mga pribilehiyo sa mga tao na nagtatrabaho sa Cavite Arsenal. Nang inalis ito sa kanila, ay pinagbayad din sila ng buwis at sa pilitang pinagtrabaho. Pinalala pa daw ang sitwasyon ng pagparatang dun sa mga kaparian natin dahil daw sa kanilang galit sa mga Spanish friars. Inutusan nila ang mga rebelde laban dito sa mga Spanish friars. Izquierdo, in an obviously biased report, highlighted the attempt to overthrow the Spanish government in the Philippines to install a new hari in the persons of Fathers Burgos and Zamora. At ngayon, hindi natin alam kung anong tumatakbo sa isip ni Gobernador General Izquierdo sa kanyang ulat, pero dahil nga syempre isa siyang Espanyol at ayaw din niya sigurong masirang kanyang imahe dun sa Spanish government. Kaya siguro itong si Gobernador General Izquierdo ay inaangat niya yung kanyang sarili doon sa Spanish government. Kaya itong pagpapabagsak ng gobyerno ng Espanya ay sa pamamagitan ng paglalagay ng isang bagong hari sa kaatauhan ni na Padre Burgos at Padre Zamora. They also identified other reasons which seemingly made the issue a lot more serious, which included the presence of native clergy who, out of spite against Spanish friars, conspired and supported the rebels. The abolition of privileges enjoyed by the laborers of the Cavite Arsenal are the exemption from paying tributes and forced labor. According to some, the cause of insurrection. There were, however, other causes. Ito yung tinatawag nila na pribilehiyong natatanggap ng mga nagtatrabaho sa arsenal. Ang arsenal ay isang paggawaan ng mga armas ng mga Espanyol. Pero sinabi din dito na meron pa daw iba pang dahilan. Itong ibang dahilan na ito ay tinatawag natin na pag-aaklas noon sa Cavite. Ay tinatawag din na pagdaing ng mga American publicists. Tsikang tinatawag na criminal policy of the senseless governor na kung saan ang tinutukoy nito ay si General Emilio Aguinaldo, na siya raw ang namuno sa tinatawag nating revolutionary government, itong gobyernong Pilipino na kumakalaban sa Espanya. These ideas of mutiny o pag-aalsa ay nagbigay daan sa mga Pilipino na magkaroon ng kasarinlan nila. To reach these goals, tinrabaho nila ito sa pamamagitan ng mga kaparian o mga Pilipino kaparian. Sabi ni Montero na who out of spite toward friars, ang friars na tinutukoy nito ay ang mga kapariang Espanyol. That it means na ang mga Pilipino o mga kapariang Pilipino ay galit sa mga Spanish friars. Sa panimula pa lang ng taong 1872, ang mga may kapangyarihan o yung Spanish authorities, meron na silang naririnig na mga bali-balita tungkol sa pag-aaklas na pwedeng mangyari laban sa mga Espanyol. Noon ay hindi nila binagyang pansin ang mga ganitong klaseng balita. Since the days of La Torre ay nangyari na raw itong mga sikretong pag-aaklas na ito. Itong mga namumuno raw sa pag-aaklas na ito ay nakikita-kita raw sila sa tahanan o bahay ni Joaquin Pardo de Tavera at saka doon sa padre na si Padre Jacinto Zamora. Kadalasan pinamumunuan daw ito ng mga tinatawag nating simbahan at kaparian sa Bacoor, na siyang tinatawag nating soul of the movement o kaluluwa daw ito ng tinatawag nating organisasyon. Kaya mabigat ang mga paratang ni Montero, kaya masasabi nating kanyang salaysay ay biased. Sabi din ni Izquierdo na hanggang ngayon daw ay hindi pa natin matukoy kung nagpaplano silang magpatayo ng kaharian o ng isang republika dahil itong mga Indio ay walang salita na makakapaglarawan ng klase ng gobyerno. In Tagalog, it is called hari. At nung lumaon, natukoy daw na yung ilalagay na pinuno doon sa gobyernong iyon ay isang pari at ang pagpipilian ay sina Padre Jose Burgos at si Jacinto Zamora. Kaya din na sila ay nahatulan dahil sila daw ang mastermind sa pag-aaklas na ito. In the Spaniards' account, the events of 1872 was premeditated and was part of a big conspiracy among educated leaders, mestizos, lawyers, and residents of Manila and Cavite. They allegedly planned to liquidate high-ranking Spanish officers, then kill the friars. Sa salaysay ni Vidal at Izquierdo, matagal na raw na plinano ang pangyayari noong 1872 at ito daw ay bahagi ng isang malaking pag-aaklas ng mga edukadong tao. Nasa plano na raw nila na ligpitin ang lahat ng kapariang Espanyol at mga namumunong opisyalis ng Espanya. With this, masasabi natin na grabe at matindi talaga ang paratang na ito sa mga Pilipino. For me, it's like they exaggerated everything. On January 20, 1872, the district of Sampaloc celebrated the feast of the Virgin Loreto. Came with it were some fireworks display. While the fireworks display was still going on, the Caviteños mistook this as the signal to commence with the attack. Ngayon, ang distrito nga ng Sampaloc ay nagdiwang ng pista ng Loreto at sila ay nagkaroon ng fireworks display. Samantala, ang mga Caviteños naman ay akala nila na ang mga fireworks display na yon ay isa ng hudyat para sa paghihimagsik o pag-aalsa nila sa mga officers o sa mga opisyales ng Espanya. 200 men was led by Sergeant Lamadrid, attacked Spanish officers at sight and seized the arsenal. Ngayon, noong malaman ni Gobernador General Izquierdo ang nasabing pagsugod o pag-alsa, he ordered reinforcement of the Spanish officers in Cavite to quell or tapusin na ang nasabing pag-alsa. Sa huli ay natalo din ang mga Caviteño dahil akala nila ay darating ang mga Manileños para tulungan subalit hindi sila nakarating. As a result, the leaders of the plots were killed and also the Gumbursa fathers were tried by a court-martial and sentenced to be executed. Ang iba naman kagaya nila Joaquin Pardo de Tavera, Antonio Maria Regidor, Jose Basa at Pio Basa ay tinanggalan ng lisensya at sila'y inaresto. Sila rin ay hinatulan ng habang buhay na pagkakakulong at ipinatapon sila sa Marianas Island. On February 17, 1872, the Gumbursa were executed to serve as a threat to Filipinos never to attempt to fight the Spaniards again. Ang Gumbursa ay pinatay na nga sa pamamagitan ng pag-arote. At sila ay nagsilbing panakot sa mga Pilipino na gustong magtangka na lumaban sa mga Espanyol. Ngayon ay pakinggan naman natin ang Filipino version ng Cavite Mutiny. Meron tayong dalawang primary accounts o dalawang pangunahing pinanggagalingan na kung saan ito ay lumitaw para pabulaanan ang salaysay ni Izquierdo at saka ni Montero. First, the account of Dr. Trinidad Hermenegildo Pardo de Tavera, a Filipino scholar and researcher who wrote a Filipino version of bloody incident in Cavite. According to this account, the incident was merely a mutiny by Filipino soldiers and laborers of the Cavite arsenal to the dissatisfaction arising from draconian policies of Izquierdo, such as the abolition of privileges and the prohibition of the founding of the School of Arts and Trades for Filipinos, which the general saw as smokescreen to creating a political club. Masyado kasing mabagsik itong pamamalakad ni Izquierdo, kaya nagkaroon sila ng paghihiganti dahil una ay tinanggalan sila nitong mga pribilehiyo. Inilis din ang tinatawag na pagkakaroon ng mga eskwelahan ng iba't ibang trade kagaya ng mga occasional courses para sa mga Pilipino na sa tingin daw ni Izquierdo ay isang paraan para magkaroon daw ng mga tinatawag na mga faction o mga political club. Kasi pagka nagkaroon tayo ng eskwelahan, magkakaroon ng diwa, magkakaroon tayo ng kaalaman at syempre tayo ay matututo. Kagaya nga tinawag nila tayong mga Indio dahil ayaw nila tayong matuto. Syempre kapag tayo ay matututo, matutunan rin natin kung paano sila kalabanin. At para sa kanila, isa raw itong threat para sa kanilang general. Sa tingin ni Tavera na yung mga praling Espanyol at ni General Izquierdo, ginamit raw nila ang Cavite Mutiny upang mapalaki ang issue. Nagpaplano na itong gobyerno sa Madrid ng paglilimita o pag-aalis ng tinatawag na pagbabawas ng kapangyarihan sa mga kaparian natin upang hindi na sila makialam pa, magkaroon ng boses sa mga isyu kagaya ng pamumuno ng gobyerno at dun sa pamamahala ng educational institutions. Sa madaling salita ay pinagkaitan ng kapangyarihan ang mga kaparian nating Pilipino. Naghahanap ng butas itong Spanish friars para mapagpatuloy nila ang pamumuno dito sa ating bansa at nakita nila ito sa Cavite Mutiny. Another account this time by French writer Edmond Plachou complemented Rivera's account and analyzed the motivations of the 1872 Cavite Mutiny. Itong si Edmond Plachou ay pinunan niya at sinang-ayunan ang account ni Tavera at nagbigay din siya ng puro-puro doon sa mga nangyari sa 1872 Cavite Mutiny. So, General Latorre created a junta composed of high officials including some friars and 6 Spanish officials. So, gumawa daw ng isang tinatawag nating grupo ng mga matataas na pinuno including the Spanish friars at mga namumunong Espanyol. At the same time, there was created by the government in Madrid a committee to investigate the same problems submitted to the Manila Committee. When the two finished work, it was found that they came to the same conclusion. Kaya ayun na nga at nagkaroon sila ng tinatawag nating investigative committee upang malaman nila ang mga nangyayari. The arrival in Manila of General Izquierdo put a sudden end to all dreams of reforms. Kasi magkakaroon na sana ng reforma sa edukasyon, sa trabaho, reforma para sa mga manggagawa, pero natapos lahat ito nang dumating itong si Izquierdo. The prosecutions instituted by the new Governor General were probably expected as a result of the bitter disputes between the Filipino clerics and the friars. So, ang mga paglilitis na pinasimulan ng bagong Gobernador General ay resulta ng mapait na pakikipag-away o pagtatalo ng mga Pilipinong pari at Spanish friars. Such a policy must really end in a strong desire on the part of the other to repress cruelly. Itong mga pulisiyang ito ay ginawa dahil meron talagang masidhing kagustuhan na tapusin na ang plano ng kabila. Ang plano na tinutukoy dito ay ang planong pagpapabagsak sa mga Spanish friars na mga Pilipinong pari. So, in regard to schools, it was previously decreed that there should be in Manila a Society of Arts and Trades to be opened in March of 1871. To repress the growth of liberal teachings, General Izquierdo suspended the opening of the school the day previous to the scheduled inauguration. So, nagkaroon nga naman ng mga eskwelahan pero itong si General Izquierdo ay pinigilan niya yung pagbubukas ng mga eskwelahang ito araw bago ganapin ang mismong pagbubukas. And also, the Filipinos had a duty to render service on public roads construction and pay taxes every year. But those who were employed at the maestranza of the artillery, in engineering shops and arsenal of Cavite, were exempted from this obligation from time immemorial. Noon kasi, ang mga Pilipino sa kabuuan ay may responsibilidad sila na tumulong sa paggawa ng mga daan at pagbigay o pagbayad ng buwis kada taon. Pero ang mga nagtatrabaho dito sa maestranza doon sa artillery sa Cavite ay exempted na sila sa ganong obligasyon. So, ito na talagang kinamulatan nila noon pa man at hindi na sila nagbabayad ng buwis at hindi na sila sa pilitang pinagtatrabaho. So, without preliminaries, take note without of any kind, a decree by the governor withdrew from such old employees their retirement privileges and classified them into the ranks of those who work on public roads. At ngayon, ang gobernador ay walang pasabi o announcement man lang at bilyanan na lang inalis ang mga pribilehiyong binibigay doon sa mga nagtatrabaho sa maestranza. At ngayon, ang mga nagtatrabaho noon sa maestranza ay isinali niya rin sa mga nagtatrabaho sa public roads. At ngayon ay sino ba naman ang hindi magagalit o mabibigla kapag ang mga pribilehiyong binibigay sa iyo noon ay tinanggal at ang masakla pa doon ay isinama ka pa sa mga magtatrabaho doon sa mga public roads. The friars used the incident as a part of a larger conspiracy to cement their dominance, which had started to show cracks because of the discontent of the Filipinos. Ang mga paraling Espanyol ay ginamit lang nilang mga pangyayari ito upang patibayin ang kanilang pangingibabaw o paghahari dito sa ating bansa. Parang hindi naman sila nangingibabaw dahil marami rin ang nakasaksi ng kanilang mga pang-aabuso dito sa ating bansa. At saka, imbis na pagbutihin nila ang kanilang spiritual life dahil syempre sila ay mga pari, napapasawa pa dahil sila pa ang nagsisimula ng mga kasamaan na nangyayari dito sa ating bansa. Unintentionally and more so prophetically, the Cavite Mutiny of 1872 resulted in martyrdom of Combursa and paved the way to the revolution culminating in 1898. Ito yung nagbigay daan dun sa martyrdom ng Gumbursa at dahil doon ay ito rin ang nagbigay daan para sa himagsikan na nangyari noong 1898. So, if we will summarize the 1872 Cavite Mutiny, on the Spanish account, pinagbibintangan ang mga Pilipino kaya daw may Cavite Mutiny dahil rin gustong pabagsakin ng mga Pilipino yung Spanish government dito sa ating bansa na pinamumunuan daw o ang mastermind daw nito ay ang Kaparian Atin na sa pamumuno daw ni Padre Burgos at saka ni Padre Zamora. Sa kabilang banda, sa pagtatanggol naman ni Tavera at sa pagsasang-ayon sa kanya ni Plasio, this is just an isolated case at hindi daw ito pag-aaklas upang mapabagsak ang Spanish government dito sa ating bansa. Kung hindi ay gusto lamang daw ng mga Pilipino na maibalik sa kanila ang mga natanggal na pribilehiyo sa kanila. So, how is Cavite Mutiny connected or significant to the Philippine Revolution? Because of Cavite Mutiny, the Gumbursa father were tried or sentenced to death, which was witnessed by Jose Rizal, who then wrote his novels attacking the abuse and injustices in the Philippine society of the Spanish friars, and specifically his novel El Filibusterismo. So, anong kinalaman niya ngayon sa Philippine Revolution? Okay, so marami ang nakabasa sa sulat ni Jose Rizal at naimpluwensyahan ng mga sinulat ni Jose Rizal ang mga kaisipan ng mga Pilipino at isa na dyan ay si Andres Bonifacio. Bonifacio also embraced the ideals and the values of Jose Rizal and he put it into action. He continued the Philippine Revolution which then resulted in Philippine independence. So ayun nga at narinig nyo at natunghayan ninyo ang dalawang bersyon ng Cavite Mutiny, ang Spanish version at saka yung Filipino version.
Cavite Mutiny, January 20, 1872. Brief uprising of Filipino troops and workers at the Cavite Arsenal, which became the excuse for Spanish repression of the embryonic Philippine nationalist movement. Ironically, the harsh reaction of the Spanish authorities served ultimately to promote the nationalist cause. The mutiny was quickly crushed, but the Spanish regime under the reactionary governor Rafael de Izquierdo magnified the incident and used it as an excuse to clamp down on those Filipinos who had been calling for governmental reform. After a brief trial, three priests, Jose Burgos, Jacinto Zamora, and Mariano Gomez, were publicly executed. The three subsequently became martyrs to the cause of the Philippines' independence. The martyrdom of the three priests, which is the collective name of the three martyred priests, tagged as the masterminds of the Cavite Mutiny. The Gumbursa were prominent Filipino priests charged with treason and sedition. The Spanish clergy connected to the priests to the mutiny as part of conspiracy to stifle the movement of secular priests who desired to have their own parishes instead of being assistants to the regular friars. First, there was a dissatisfaction among the workers of the arsenal, as well as the members of the native army after the privilege were drawn back by General Izquierdo. Second, General Izquierdo introduced the strict policy that made the Filipinos move and turn away from the Spanish government out of disgust. Third, the central government failed to conduct an investigation on what truly transpired but relied on reports of Izquierdo and the friars and the opinion of the public. Fourth, the happy days are the friars were already numbered in 1872 when the central government in Spain decided to deprive them of the power to intervene in government affairs. Fifth, Filipinos during the time were active participants. They responded to what they deemed as injustices
And lastly, for the actions severed the ill feeling of the Filipinos in the event inspired Filipino patriots to call for reforms and eventually independence. The road to independence was rough and tough. Many patriots, named and unnamed, shed their bloods to attain independence. Our forefathers suffered enough. We should not forget that before we came across to victory. As we enjoy our freedom, may we be more historically aware of our past to have a better future ahead of us.